Scouting Report.
The Scouting Report is where we dig a little bit deeper into a single character, what we learn about them based on the events of the chapter and how that might inform the rest of the books to come. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Snape, and I'm going to bring a specific theory into the discussion, and hopefully you're going to have a whole lot to say. But let's start here. Snape is perhaps the most polarizing character in this entire fandom. To the point that if you point out any of his flaws, particularly on social media, you'll be visited by one of his many defenders. Seriously, you can board up your windows or move away. They will still find you. I find it fascinating, and I have a couple of theories that I would like your thoughts on here and on Patreon, which we'll get to in a second. One, I think some people just don't like rooting for the mainstream hero. And because Snape turns out to have been working on Dumbledore's orders and on his side during Harry's lifetime, there's a certain type of person who would just rather get behind him as a misunderstood hero instead of rooting for Harry.
Yeah.
Also, I think there are people who accept Alan Rickman's performance in the movie as canon Snape. Rickman gives a very compelling performance and, in my opinion, adds some dimensions to the character that simply aren't present in the book. This is where I wonder if we could do a bonus episode for Patreon. We've talked about this a little bit about that casting before, and I think we could have a really fun discussion over there.
I'm so down. Yes.
As a reminder, if you become a patron, you can get early access to ad-free versions of the episodes. You can also get bonus content like theory deep dives that we do on Theory Corner. We'll do award banquets at the end of each book. We'll do more character discussions. And this week, more Amanda. Your support on Patreon is literally how we'll be able to keep making new episodes and trying to keep the show going as well as growing. So we do appreciate that support. Back to Book Snape.
Yes. So your first point, or I should say the fandom's first point, right? Like this, I love what you said. And I think that's so true is people don't like rooting for Harry. Like I think about this, I think it was like a Tumblr post that I read one time and it was like, can you imagine like what dork's favorite character is Harry Potter?
Literally nobody says that Harry is their favorite character. No one.
Right. Even though, and you've heard our show, like we do a winner and loser kind of thing. I give it to Harry a lot as winner.
Yeah.
And I feel like as an adult, I appreciate Harry more. But I think you're right. I think people are contrarians. A lot of people are contrarians by their nature. And if something is too popular, then they find a reason to hate it.
Yeah, it's almost cliche to root for the main character.
Exactly.
You gotta like somebody else. Are you a real fan if you don't like a deep cut character?
Right, exactly. Yes.
The answer is yes. You can be a real fan and still like the main character.
I am a big fan. The older I get, I'm a big fan of let people like what they like. And to me, it's another way of gatekeeping in the fandom.
It kind of is. But that's a good point, because I do want to say that neither of the hypotheses that I described are meant to be an indictment. If either of them describes you, that's fantastic. You see things differently than I do, that we do, but that's just, it's a layer of the fandom that I actually like and think is really fascinating. We can all read the same words on paper and come away with completely different interpretations of the story. I think it's awesome.
It's great. Now, I will say, if you're a huge fan of Snape, me personally, I will judge you a little bit, just a tiny, tiny little bit. I can't help it. I can help it. I could make a choice not to do that, but I still find myself being a little judgy about it. I've gotten in so many arguments about this. I mean, my favorite example is my sister-in-law, who's like a moderate Snape fan. She's with me when I saw Cursed Child. And we were in the lobby during intermission and having a heated discussion about Snape. And I said, of course, I got really quiet when I said it. I said, Snape is an incel, like really loud. And I got a lot of looks.
As you do. Yeah. And of course, I've made my thoughts pretty clear on his behavior in this chapter and as a teacher, as of you. But there's a theory that I did want to bring up for the Scouting Report segment. And that's the first thing that Snape asks Harry is, Potter, what would you get if I added powdered root of asphodel into an infusion of wormwood? People have picked this apart, and apparently, I don't know if you've heard this theory or not, but according to Victorian Flower Language, Asphodel is a type of lily, meaning my regrets follow you to the grave, and wormwood means absence, and also typically is symbolized bitter sorrow. So people have combined this to say that it literally means I bitterly regret Lily's death.
I mean, that tracks for him.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm not sure that I have heard that. And what I do feel like I remember hearing is that the whole Ultimate Snape line
Mm-hmm.
with Snape and Lily was one of the first kind of plot points that the author had decided on. So
Mm-hmm.
like it kind of, where there's a lot of things that I think probably ended up blossoming after book one was complete. To me, like it makes sense that this is one point that she's like planting a seed, no pun intended, for this early. Interesting.
Yeah, there's another piece of this too. There's actually a couple, but I'm going to skip to this one because it's the most interesting for the conversation. Is that Snape does say in the chapter, if you combine powdered root of asphodel into an infusion of wormwood, you'd brew a sleeping potion so powerful it's known as the draught of living death.
Yes.
So the question is this Snape trying to tell us that the ingredients, which his regret over Lily's fate together, actually reflect what his life is now? Living death.
I mean, I guess like you could convince me that that's true if it was like a Freudian beneath his subconscious kind of clue. In no way do I think that this character is capable of like dropping those breadcrumbs for anyone, because he cares about being understood.
That's interesting to me because I think it's a fantastic catch from a literary perspective. But truthfully, I think it's crap.
You think it's like an accidental kind of thing?
Well, no, I'm not even saying that it wasn't intentionally written that way, but it doesn't excuse behavior. If I insult you and make you feel like garbage about yourself, it doesn't make me a better person if I put a secret coded message in that insult that you don't understand.
So are you saying that like you've heard this theory within the context of people trying to like defend Snape?
Mm-hmm. This is proof that Snape was a good guy all along, and what he was really doing was trying to tell Harry, "I'm sorry for your mom, buddy." Like, no,
I give that a big.
It doesn't work.
No way.
It just doesn't work for me.
It definitely doesn't. Yeah. Whenever I reread that, I always get caught up on Draft of Living Death because I'm like, okay, flash forward to book 6. That's how Harry ends up winning the Felix Felicis, which we know how important that ends up being.
Right.
Which of course I don't in a million years think that was an intentional plot point. I don't. I mean, maybe it was, but I don't
think it was just a pullback. Needed a potion for him to make.
Exactly. Yes. I think you're absolutely right.
My 2 cents. Which is probably not worth one. Anyway, one thing that I mentioned earlier, and now it's, I guess, is as good a time as any to bring up, is Dumbledore's Big Plan. We know that Snape is, as Kevin would say, serving 2 masters. He's at Hogwarts on the orders of both Dumbledore and Voldemort. But he's an awful teacher. We've established that.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you, is there any other possible job that he could be doing while still fulfilling both of these roles?
Oh,
otherwise, how does Dumbledore let him anywhere near kids?
Right. Like I could think of some hilarious positions, like being like the Quidditch coach. Like, can you imagine? But
well, because he would have to be close enough to Dumbledore in order to have their little like secret meetings. He would have to be close enough for Dumbledore to keep an eye on him to make sure that he wasn't double crossing him. And he would have to be close enough to Dumbledore and in a believable enough spot that Voldemort would think that he was actually doing the thing he was supposed to be doing and spying. So is there another role, not teacher?
I think there is a role, maybe not at Hogwarts, but I think there's a role for him in Hogsmeade somewhere. Like he has some kind of like apothecary that's sort of like a little bit of like a mob front kind of thing, where, because Dumbledore pops into Hogsmeade a lot. So he'd be able to kind of keep an eye on him, but maybe that's too far away. I guess you'd really need to keep him in the castle.
That's true, because I think there's also a layer to this that Voldemort probably, when he put Snape in that post, I'm going to use air quotes, was also hoping that since he couldn't get the Defense Against the Dark Arts job and make a little army and recruit students, he would hope that Snape would have at some point in time been able to do this. So the first thing that popped into my head was Filch's job, but like he can do magic. So what's the point? And would it be a believable enough position?
Right. And
Yeah.
probably not. I mean, I feel like it would have to be something like maybe Madam Pince's job in the library, which, I mean, she's incredibly unpleasant. So
Could
like,
you imagine? You put that book back.
That's great.
Anyways,
that sounded like Kevin's Rickman impression. Was that a Kev moment?
It was.
The Belated Binge Podcast.